Welcome, my friends, to Inside the Minds of Authors. I'm DC Gomez, and I'm thrilled you're joining me today for a fun conversation with a passionate author. We're kicking off the program, like it's our tradition, with a short reading from the feature book. I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's get started.
Hi there. Hi, I'm Jeff Beamish, a fiction writer from Canada, and I'm going to be reading an excerpt from my novel, No, You're Crazy. It's a novel about a delusional and suicidal teenage girl who claims she has psychic ability. Of course, no one believes her, but after she helps her drug addict parents win several jackpots while gambling, some dangerous people start to take an interest in her, or at least so it appears. Know You're Crazy examines the many ways a family can wound and heal us. It also takes a sensitive look at neurodiversity, and in doing so, questions the nature of the reality we think we live in. So here we go with an excerpt from chapter 1. Before I start, just a warning, this first section deals in part with suicide. It can sound a little dark, but this book at its heart is a story of hope and love. Here I go. The man wearing glasses with lenses as thick as a car's windshield plunks himself down pervy close to me on the gray cement bench outside my high school. It's almost like he doesn't see me, which is possible given his glasses and my ability to hide in the seams of everyone else's life. More likely, he doesn't see me as significant, as someone whose presence deserves a little freaking space. But apparently, I know shit, because in seconds, the stranger starts inching closer, his body almost jerking with curiosity as he turns and stares at me like he would his favorite porn site. A half dozen times he leans in, his breath on my neck, his eyes on my skull, as if he thinks my head, like his, is packed with twisted thoughts, heavy enough to burst through my skull and drop on the ground for him to see. Before I can drag my tired loser ass out of there, his lips part and words start tumbling out. Hello, miss. And it's obvious what will follow. Either the usual creepy desires of someone who has spent the afternoon in a windowless bar, or else the judgmental stuff that comes from people who catch me scolding myself on a packed bus or sitting quietly in a piss-stained alley and just have to ask what my problem is or if I need help, like it's their damn business. When the man's next words finally sink in, they are almost enough to make me wet myself. I am a police officer with the missing person unit, he says, and I know you're struggling with mental health issues, and I am here to help you. I steal a panicked look at this random guy in his 30s, who's blotchy, balding, unassuming, in a serial killer way, no taller than me and almost as pale. He wears expensive ASICS sneakers that look brand new and a bright shirt stretched tight over his round belly, exactly how you would look to put people at ease before locking them up forever. Even if he wants to help, can't he see I want to be left alone? That all I desire in this world is to be free of everyone else and the pain that comes with them. So I say in my sanest and most polite voice, without making eye contact, I think you have the wrong person, sir. He sticks his phone in my face, its screen revealing a digitized Miami-Dade Police Department missing person poster with my name and my impossibly joyful and unmedicated face staring back. I release a soft groan, far better than tossing my head back and letting loose an unshackled wail. What exactly are you doing here, he asked. Do not look at the train tracks. I warned myself at least 5 frigging times before doing just that. The cop's gaze shifts to the train tracks across the street, or maybe to the 2 white crosses wired to the chain link fence built around the tracks to keep people safe from fast-moving commuter trains. The fence itself is rusted and fractured with one human-sized hole, hence the 2 crosses, one for a troubled grade 8 boy who slipped through last month, one for a homeless guy who took a wrong turn a couple of months before. The cop sniffs the air, like the homeless guy's grim body odor and the grade 8 boy's familiar stink of sadness still cling to their lingering souls. The cop turns back to me and speaks my name, Ashley. And as a single word drifts past, my body begins vibrating madly, a low hum ticking in my ears, and another commuter train hurtles by. When the train is gone, when my butt remains safely parked on the bench, let out a long, relieved breath. Or is it a sigh that's thick with disappointment? The cop's eyes go wide, and I instantly understand what he thinks. No way is the cop right. But what have I been doing here for the last hour, if not staring with longing at the tracks, if not learning important things like how often the trains run, where the gap in the fence is, how fast the trains are moving when they screech past, how the raised stone bed where the tracks sit looks like a sacrificial altar in some ancient civilization. How many seconds would it take a teenage girl, if she felt like it, to sprint across the road, duck through the fence, and hurl herself down in front of a fast moving steel mass before anyone could stop her? My body slumps violently, like my blood has turned to ice. The cop says, "My name is Jerry. Why don't we talk for a bit, Ashley?" We don't talk. Maybe because he wants to give me time to reconsider, to decide that no, I don't really want that. But that is obviously a concept my mind is considering for a reason. And why not? Is it crazy to hunger for the suffering to end, or to yearn for whatever comes after it ends? At best, a complete transcendence of my soul. At worst, a peaceful nothingness that stretches out forever, which is not so bad. It's the biggest worry, Ashley, the cop finally says. Your history of depression, coupled with the recent loss of someone you love. Mr. Know It All smiles kindly and slouches in his seat, making it obvious he has just started casting major shade, only just started dragging me back to his reality, his little world where the girl he sees before him has gone crazy with grief and can't quite crawl out of the pit of guilt she's reserved exclusively for those who managed to kill their own damn fathers. In my head, I begin berating myself for coming here. For the last 2 days, I wandered the city's depressing back streets, disappearing from home long enough to get reported missing, like anyone cares. This wretched journey could have taken me to train tracks anywhere in the city. Instead, here I am, back at my school, this place where I stand up for all the wrong reasons, this place where I've always been about as welcome as an STD. I lost my father too when I was young, the cop says, trying again. I understand. I raise my hand, surprised when this shuts him up. In time, I say, "You don't look like any cop I've ever seen," hoping that doesn't sound mean. He grins like he's heard this 1,000 times. Policing has changed. So many of our interactions are now with good people who struggle with mental illness and deserve to be treated with intelligence and compassion. People like you, Ashley. I don't have a mental illness, I tell this Jerry guy. I'm actually super stable. I prepare to prove it by giving him a detailed explanation I have rehearsed and delivered far too often these past few months. A 6-minute long lecture, and yes, I timed it. Misdiagnosis heaped upon misdiagnosis by the same confused psychiatrist who loved the word delusion. My hyperphantasia, where my mind would conjure vivid images, diagnosed as delusion. My synesthesia, where each number and letter have its own personality, more delusion. My great awakening, where my soul managed to connect with a greater presence, a universal consciousness, still more damn delusion. My soul transcending from my lame body into a higher being, one that sometimes has visions of the future. You got it, which all led, surprise, to the same doctor diagnosing me with some batshit crazy disorder called Cotard syndrome, where the sufferer, in this case me, apparently believes she is dead. I don't, however, believe I am dead. If I did, why visit the damn train tracks today? But I do believe my consciousness has evolved enough to no longer need a crap body, enough that I have developed, at the very least, heightened intuition, or maybe, at the very most, something far more. I start to explain everything, but decide my explanation would require too much damn effort. Besides, this man likely won't listen either. It's far better to show him. You know, I have this pretty amazing ability to know what people are thinking, I say, kind of like intuition. He smiles. So what am I thinking? Of course, what he thinks is that I'm crazy. Pretty damn obvious, even to those who aren't psychic. Yet there is more, much more. I don't need to push my way into his thoughts to find out. I just know. My hands begin trembling. Maybe it's better not to answer. You are hiding something big, I say, unable to help myself, and you are dangerous to me.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Inside the Minds of Authors. I really hope you enjoyed that reading as much as I did, because we're getting ready to jump in. Quick reminder, my dear friends, if you're new to the podcast, remember, You can become a podcast junkie by joining our Patreon community and getting a behind the scenes on all the fun things we do while we record this interview. You get to be able to watch the unedited version as well as support the making and continue to help us out. So that would be amazing. Click the link, don't miss out. And now let's get started. Hello, Mr. Jeff. How are you?
Oh, I'm great. Thank you.
I'm so happy you're joining us. Welcome.
Yeah, it's bright and early on the west coast of Canada, but I'm ready.
I can only imagine because it's a little early here in Texas. So let's start. I love this reading and I want to know more about it. I want to know, where did this story come from and what made you decide to write it?
Well, I've always been interested in identity, who we think we are, how we see ourselves, how we see other people, but even more than that, how we see the world we live in. I'm especially fascinated by how our minds can, some people would say, warp our perception of reality, maybe to protect us from danger, to protect us from ourselves, to give us happiness. If it helps us, is this alternate view of reality, assuming it is an alternate view, really so bad? So when I read an article about a strange disease called Cotard syndrome, where the sufferer believes she's dead, it caught my attention. So I started doing what sort of, I think a lot of writers do, playing the what if game. So what if someone thought they were dead and others actually believed her? Okay, that sounded too far-fetched. What if she believed she was physically dead, but spiritually alive and had special powers bestowed by God, namely the power of clairvoyance? It still seemed like a stretch. Well, what if she did actually have a knack of knowing what would happen next? Maybe by pure luck, intuition, something else. And yes, what if she had helped her drug addict parents win some large amounts of money gambling? Something kind of concrete that you can put your finger on. So I thought I was onto something then. I wanted to write a novel that left readers making many judgments. And it starts right there in the first chapter that I just read. Is that a real cop or someone who is interested in Ashley for her powers of clairvoyance? So throughout the novel, the reader will constantly ask the same question: is the girl crazy, or there's something more to her wild beliefs? And ultimately, the question is sort of what's real and what isn't real, and why do the same things need to be real to everyone? Can't some people experience the world in a different way? I didn't set out to write a story about neurodiversity, but it's kind of what happened.
This story has so many twists and turns, which is super exciting. Is it going to be a thriller? Does it have those elements? What would you define this as? Because I'm going, it can go so many ways. So I was like, okay, where am I at? Is this a psychological thriller? Where are we?
Yeah, I mean, in part, it's a bit of a psychological thriller, but it is hard to define. It was hard to market to publishers and agents. And it's a work of contemporary fiction. It's got some young adult content. Every few months, the story seemed to shift as I was writing it. So it became something else. But it's a work of commercial fiction. But it is something a little bit different than that, I think, in the end.
You have a really good, fun mashup of different genres. And every time I talk about genres, I'm kind of lyric because everybody's like, do you have to have one? It's easy for marketing because audience gets to having expectations of it. I like the fact that you have all these different elements coming and going. The question is, do you know if she's crazy or not? Or are you just going to leave us hanging?
Well, that's a very good question, because I think the book is written in a way that readers get to kind of make that decision for themselves. I'm sort of leaning one way slightly more than the other, but it is one of those things. What is sort of crazy? I guess that's the definition. Einstein was right when he said the true sign of intelligence is not knowledge, but imagination. It's actually, I have a quote in the book that Ashley likes. Pablo Picasso says, everything you can imagine is real. And this book sort of does examine what happens when we start to shed the bounds that limit the way we see the world in our lives. It is about a character who has done that and sees the world in a bigger, sort of more dramatic way, in a more interesting way, more powerful way. The readers are going to have to make a decision there when they read this.
Also a much more terrifying way because we're so used to having the confines of what we think is real. So when you have a book that says, but what if it's not? What if there's so much more? You're going, wait, am I ready for this? So the question for you is how much research you did? Because you said you started like you read it and you're like, oh, I like that. Then you went down that path. How much research it took you to get here?
it took a lot studying the relativity of belief and the nature of reality. There are a lot of really interesting books that will talk about things like that. They're actually quite fascinating, talking about what sort of our eyes see when we view something, the magnetic fields and the binary codes and what we actually see with our eyes and what our brain does with that. But as opposed to what actually is there in reality. Some suggest we see like kind of like a video game version of what's out there constructed by our minds. Perhaps this suggests everyone could see the same thing a little bit differently and maybe as nature intended. I did a bit of research, and the more research I did, the less sort of solid everything in this universe seemed, and the more you can kind of see we do construct our own reality, which I find absolutely fascinating and gave me a kind of a lot to write about.
Love the twists and turns, and you have enough material to go anywhere. So is this a standalone or are you doing a series? How does this go?
I wrote it as a standalone, but interestingly enough, I'm doing a kind of a follow story to it that includes some of the same characters. So I'm just sort of writing this other story. So I guess it can be called a follow. It's a strange book too, because it's set in the very near future when people start to believe there's evidence that our world is a simulation. So this follow book asks the question, does it matter if our reality isn't what we think it is? Which is kind of a nice companion piece to this book as well. Like if we're living in a simulation, doesn't matter. If we have good lives, loving lives, if we kind of help humanity, it doesn't matter. At its heart is also a love story, a story about love and faith and compassion and all those things.
You mentioned as you introduced the book, but this story was about hope. This one that you're working on is about love. How important are these themes for you?
I think they're very important. I always think you want to write about sort of what's important to people and what motivates them. And there's so much darkness in the world, at least if not a happy ending, a bittersweet ending. I think hopefully readers will find some light in there if they keep reading, if they get past the first chapter.
I understand that. I completely understand creating a universe, and sometimes it's hard to start. I'm like, it's okay, take a leap. Once you get to that, you're like, oh my God, this is amazing. So congratulations, because I love it. Your inspiration comes from many different places. How do you know which story to pursue?
It's a very good question. I'm someone who really likes to outline, and I use this program called Plotter that I think a lot of writers use. I just love it. I love having everything down in there. That said, I think the story does surprise you. And I've heard some writers say story are living, breathing entities with a mind of their own. And I found that with this story. Originally, when I started writing, it was a story about a man who has this crazy teenager thrust upon him, forcing changes to his dead end life. But the more I wrote, the more this crazy teenager, Ashley, began to assert herself and become the story. And just strange things happened. She started to actually push back against this Cotard syndrome diagnosis that I, as the author, gave to her. Well, she's got this disease. This is what she has. And she started to push back and against that. Again, she pushed back against the medication. She started to question whether she's sick or just coping with the best she can with this very traumatic world that we all live in. And she also began to suggest that maybe we are the crazy ones for expecting her to conform to our reality. So yeah, I started writing one story and wound up with a completely different story by the time I was finished. And even though I'm this great outliner and plot and always plotting things, the story just changed on its own. And I was forever changing things in that program.
I can completely relate to you because unlike pantsers that just go with the flow, we'll go back and fix the outline. Like we're very much like, no, the outline still has to match this book that continues to change. So I love the fact that you went back and fixed it. The fact that you still maintain yourself being flexible and letting these characters evolve in the stories is priceless. Mr. Jeff, what advice would you give to up and coming author?
Oh, well, I guess above all, you got to be persistent. You got to never give up on yourself. I do find it just the whole publishing industry. It always amazes me how tough it is to kind of interest agents and publishers. And you can think you've got great work. I think sometimes I can draw them in, but sometimes I think they are looking at something completely different, not at art, but as something that can make money for them. It is funny. I think sometimes authors are working on art and then you get publishers and agents that are looking at the financial value of something and they're kind of out of sorts with each other. There is a path to getting published. And I think you do always have to be very persistent with your work. But you also have to be improving it. One thing I've learned, if you're submitting your work to agents and publishers and it's getting rejected, trying to figure out why are they rejecting it? Is it not grabbing them enough? Is it not original enough? And so I think you always have to be working to improve your work. People can kind of get set in their ways and say, no, this is great. Maybe it is great, but sometimes the presentation maybe has to change a little bit or something has to just be adjusted. So they have to be persistent, but they also have to be flexible as well.
Ooh, that is a very powerful combination. Remember, be persistent, but be flexible. I love it. Tell us, Mr. Jeff, where can our listeners find you, where they can learn more about the book, where are you located?
Well, I do have a website, jeffbeamish.com. So JEFFBEAMISH.com. I have 2 novels, Know You're Crazy, which is just coming out, and then an earlier novel that was published about 9 years ago. So there's information on them on that website. There's links. My book is on most sort of book selling websites and hopefully in a few bookstores, but Amazon's always the big place to be and various countries, United States, UK, Canada, elsewhere.
Listeners, make sure to grab this book. Make sure to go on this fun, amazing journey of psychological and a little bit questioning yourself thriller. So, Mr. Jeff, are you ready for the lightning round?
Sure.
Easy peasy. Don't think too hard on this. Let's do this. Coffee or tea?
Believe it or not, neither.
Really?
So I'm not conforming. I'm not a coffee or tea drinker.
I like thin crust or stuffed pizza.
Thin crust.
Okay.
Yeah, as you get older, you find all that gluten's not very good for you.
I hate to admit it, but I still love it. I'm like, you're so right. Pirate or knight?
I think a knight. I always think I'm better writing about the good guys. So.
I like. That's actually a pretty good way of looking at it. Ebook or print?
I love print books still. I still read a print newspaper, if you can believe that. Although the majority of my news I do get online, but I still like to sit down with the print newspaper and look at it.
That's pretty impressive. I think our paper got canceled. I was like, oh my God, you get the paper. I'm amazed.
Yeah, they're getting smaller and smaller. From someone who worked in that profession, it was the last 15, 20 years, it was shrinking every day. It's unfortunate.
It is so sad. So here's the last one, and it's a little different. If your book had a theme song, what would it be?
People have put sort of songs to it on TikTok and that one song, Crazy, but I think it'd be anything written by Kanye West. I do find he's very creative, if a little off at times. He's got a lot of songs that would probably would work with this novel.
Both options are really good. I like it. Awesome. Mr. Jeff, do you have any closing remarks for us?
I just want to thank you and all your readers. And it's important work you're doing because I think books are very important. Works of fiction are extremely important for our society. So it's great work that you're doing. And it's great the readers are listening and reading.
Thank you. Thank you. I truly love it. It's just so much fun, Mr. Jeff. Thank you so much for joining us. Congratulations on the book. So everybody make sure you go ahead and catch it. Have a blast. Have an amazing day, Mr. Jeff. Everyone, make sure to go ahead and follow him. His website is in the comments, so click on that. If you are not following us, click like, share with somebody. Know we're always better when we're growing together. And if you're interested, you still have a chance to join the podcast community. In the meantime, guys, have an amazing day, and I'll see you guys again next week. Bye.